Hello, everyone. We'll just wait a couple of minutes here for people to log in. Just waiting for some more folks, but we will be starting pretty soon here. I'll get things going. Hopefully you can all see the screen.
Welcome everyone to today's Full Method webinar. Today I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Andrew Weiler. Andrew is from Forest Hill Church and will introduce himself in a little bit. And the topic for today is very apropos in today's world in church evolution, which is the merging of the physical and digital experience and the importance of having an engagement first model for ministry. What does that mean? And maybe Andrew, if you could just introduce yourself and explain what is an engagement first model. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and it's exciting to talk through this topic because for me, even just as way of introduction, I have been in church ministry for a long time. You could say I was conscripted into it by my mother. At the beginning, I worked in children's ministry for about a decade. And if you are working in kids ministry, you recognize that engagement matters a lot, because if kids don't fake interest. If they're engaged with you, then they're engaged and connected and they're going along with everything. And if they're disengaged, you're just herding cats. And so as I was growing through kids ministry, children's ministry, I started seeing, and we started doing projects in the digital space, trying to figure out how are we going to engage the next generation in faith. And those questions led to kind of broader scope questions across the whole church, which is what, through a series of conversations and opportunities moved me into the role that I'm in now, kind of director of media, communication, technology, IT, a lot of that runs under my purview at the church. And so much of that is really driven towards creating a way for people to get engaged early and stay engaged with the church in the same way I was doing even with kids ministry. So that's kind of what brought me into this. And to me, an engagement first model of ministry, especially in the current kind of day and time that we live in, is really people are expecting you to connect with them before they show up. And so you need to connect and engage with them and your conversation will actually draw them further and further into a relationship with the church. And I've heard, this is just in the same vein, now 2 folks who I've talked to who are younger, in their early 20s, who talk about their engagement to one another as a couple as they got engaged and married. And they call it, oh, it's a very millennial or very Gen Z story, which is we met online, we messaged each other, we had Zoom conversations before we ever met in person. And then we traveled from different locations to meet one another in person, realized this is something, pursued a relationship, and eventually ended up getting married. So literally their engagement process was digital first, then physical. And I think that's something that the church needs to be aware of, that that's an increasingly common story in this generation and going forward into the future.
Yeah, so true. And maybe introduce Forest Hill a little bit to everyone, location, campus setup, etc., so people can understand the scale you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So Forest Hill Church is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have 6 campuses, and they're all physical locations, buildings that we've built and created. We have several thousand coming on a regular weekend, and so I mean, just for us, the concern that we've always had is, as you grow and become a larger church, how do you maintain a community connected feel? And so that's been a consistent question for us through the years, and stuff that we'll talk about in this time together. But yeah, as a growing church, as a church that's been around the city for a long time, making sure that we stay connected deeply in the communities that we serve, even in a hyper local sense, that's important to us.
Yeah, and the complexity of that now is what I believe everyone is grappling with at church, and we will unpack this. But for instance, you've got older people, so how do they still engage? Do they still like to write on cards? Then you've got the Gen Z and the millennials, who are 2 completely different groups who like to be digitally connected first. And then you got different ethnic regions you got to deal with, and so communicating with them, it's very complex. Whereas the old model, I feel the old model was, as you said, is not a digital first experience. It's more a, hey, come to our weekend event or to our youth event, and then hopefully you'll get engaged there. And so now it's a much more complicated digital first environment. All right, well, yep. We'll unpack that in a second. If I can advance this. So Andrew, you use the Go method as well for mission trip and local outreach, correct?
Correct, yep.
And how many trips are you doing on average on international?
Yeah, we've sent in the past anywhere between 10 and 20 on a regular basis. And I think, we're trying to figure out how that comes and operationalizes as we come out of this COVID season. But yeah, we probably 10 to 20 on a regular basis over the years.
And I think the value that you expressed to me was just in this case, just the automation and reduction on administration hours, right, for your team.
Yep.
Great. Today's topic is going to be on growth method. And so tell us about just how you got to this point a little bit, and what you believed you were going to sort of see in the system before you engaged in the process.
Yeah, we have for several years been wrestling with what's the right system to get people engaged in the church, connected, and follow them through their journey, their spiritual journey. So not just, hey, how can we get them in the door, but then how do we walk alongside them? And so, we've created user stories. We've interviewed people as they've come in the doors. We've tried to put it together in some of our church management system, but that's a great place to house a lot of data. It doesn't really help, our staff walk through all of this. The other aspect is just in the church world, you've got some folks who are relatively technically savvy, and then you've got a majority who are not. So you need a tool that feels more native to them, that feels It's not complicated for them to do the most important parts of their job, which is actually connecting with individuals.
Right.
And so as we were hunting around, we've tried event type programming, and we were like, okay, well, let's get them all in here every week, or let's do this, or let's do that. And we tried a bunch of stuff. And then, having used Go and then getting connected with you, Graham, and some other folks, going, okay, growth method, this looks like a real tool that is going to do what we keep trying to find, what we've kept looking for, which is a way to move from just somebody knowing about the church to actually drawing them into an engaging relationship with the church so that they are a regular part of the community.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. Just a little plug from my side, because this is more fireside chat, as you can tell. But we actually saw this well over a year ago. Well, we've seen it for a long time. This has been promised to the market forever. But we typically try to innovate where there are gaps, right? So this is an area we saw where there's a handoff between the current systems and where ministry needs to be. And so if you want to look at something from a silver lining to COVID, is that this has just exasperated the issue, or brought this to the fore. And as people have invested on their digital experience, they typically haven't invested on this side. And my research said that over 90% of people improve their digital, but less than 5% actually spent any time or effort really on the back-end processes, which need to be automated, as I explained before, because now you have to engage first different demographics, different age groups, different everything, and each one has to be engaged effectively to draw them into personal relationship. Anyway, that's enough on my plug. So tell me some of the challenges here. I mean, these are your words, so please unpack this for the audience.
Yeah, I think as we were looking, and just as we were growing, like I said, we started realizing that even as you become bigger, every church doesn't want to lose the community feel, and some people even kind of tend to want to stay smaller because they don't lose the relational value and the relational connectivity they have with folks as they come in the door. And so as you become bigger, you actually need to think about how you become smaller. And I think technology is where it actually allows you to do that. And so an example for me that just kind of started me on the search for something like this was that as I became the one who was responsible for the database, and you start just looking at the numbers of people, I recognized that the amount of funerals that we did not equate to the amount of people who were labeled as deceased in the database. Now that seems like just a technicality, who cares kind of a question, but when you really deal with, as a church, you want to be present in the big moments of somebody's lives, and they actually expect you to be there. So when we do a funeral, we want to make sure we are walking alongside. And look, we have great pastors and great leaders who come alongside individuals and families to walk them through that process. And one of the things they always say is to the entire audience sitting there in the funeral, everyone's in attendance, is, in 6 months from now, this family is going to need you. In 9 months from now, they're going to need you. A year from now, when you've moved on with your life, and you're occasionally thinking about and praying for them, these people are going to still need you engaging with them in their life. And that was like a perfect example for me, where I said, there's got to be a better system for us to care for people throughout all of life's moments, whether it's joining a church, moving to a city, getting connected, losing a loved one. Those are all moments that the church wants to walk alongside. And so that's what started me probably on the search for things like this. And that's what gets me excited about the opportunity here for any church that's looking at using a tool like Growth.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, right? Because it extends beyond your personal interaction with these people potentially, right? And you could, we have some churches who actually do this for 20 years. So they actually build this process out to stay connected. It's fascinating. And on the first friend one, the new visit is right. can you talk about technology, which is that an interaction is less personal? Because we find that a lot. People say, well, if it's just a drip campaign, this is nothing more than Salesforce or HubSpot, right? And we've got lots of CRMs that do that. So what is it that is different in today with technology and how it can draw personal interaction?
Yeah, so we were looking at how we would redevelop our first time guest, first touch kind of experience. And so we went and started to do a thing that a lot of technology companies do, which is try to understand the user journey. We tried to understand how people get connected, and when they get connected, how do they stay connected? And one of the things that emerged as a consistent theme in all of, I mean, this was a very analog process. We just sent people out talking, asking these questions, have these like gridded maps that we said, okay, let's understand this. And one of the consistent themes was people who stuck around the church were ones who found a first friend, is kind of what we labeled it as, found a first friend. And so then we started kind of looking at that with the data of total number of people that we could find that would come into the doors versus people who actually found a first friend and then stayed connected. Right. And what we would say from our experience is we have really friendly people. So when you found a first friend, your likelihood to stick was very high, because it was, you had a crying baby out in the atrium space, and one of our staff members or a deacon or just a congregant walked over to you and engaged you in this great conversation. But what we didn't have was a system to try to make sure that everybody who wanted to find a first friend actually got connected to that first friend. And so that's part of this process, is instead of creating a new program to make sure everybody goes to the same room, because again, you're still trying to herd people. Right. The engagement first model says, no, let people take the step they want, and then you make sure that you connect them with the need that they're seeking. And so that's where what we started to do is realize that if we could kind of customize this process a little bit, if we get a little closer to the individual, then their chance of getting connected with a first friend in a meaningful way was greater and was higher. And here's, I think, what almost every church and every church that I talk to really believes, is that they really want people to be a part of the community and the body of Christ. They want them to actually be present, that there's something important about the in-person physical experience. And so I think, to your point about where a lot of CRMs and things, they exist, but they exist in this digital primary space. Endpoint is purchase, something like that. The endpoint is to buy something often. And so it's a slightly different mindset when you say, no, the purpose of this engagement pathway is not to purchase anything, it's to belong somewhere. Right. And so walking somebody into belonging has a different mindset. It has a different feel. It has a different proximity. And the expectation of in our case, our staff, or even our congregants who may help out in the process, is a greater degree of investment in the individual. They're not just jumping around to the next sales call. This is actually about welcoming somebody into a family. And so you're walking it a little bit differently. And so you need a tool that understands that, experiences that, has been a part of that throughout their own lives of all the company folks.
Yeah, so important. What we always say, and there's lots of research that I have on this, which would tell you that even if you're a Gen Z, right, or now, even though they're the first sort of really truly native people in technology, all the other generations are catching up as well. And so they're becoming more and more dependent on this and do a digital first or engagement first model. And, so if they want to scan a QR code and they are interested in your homeless outreach or something, don't invite them to church. That's not going to work. You got to tell them what their social good is, what the social good you're doing is, and engage with them how they want to engage. Then they're going to be compelled to come in. And they desire and they seek community and relationship. They actually want it, but they want it in the way they want it, right? Which is very, very different today. Okay, so I think that's the next point, which is COVID, right? Which is the engagement now drives the attendance, which is what I've just sort of talked about. So anything else you want to unpack for us under that bullet?
Yeah, I just think, kind of to springboard off of what you had just said, once you're completely remote, then the question becomes, well, how in the world am I going to make the personal connection? And so we said, okay, well, how are we going to make sure that when people want to know what's going on or where they can, come back to church, or how do they engage with opportunities to serve in the city? We really started to lean into growth and the forums that they offered, kind of to funnel people into the specific areas of interest, and actually get them into a personal connectivity space with one of our folks who was actually running whatever opportunity was out there that they were interested in. But yeah, like making sure that right there, when people are remote and things are contactless, then you need to engage them with the devices in their pocket. So picking up that phone, being able to, like, even on the, as people would watch our services online, say, and be able to scan a QR code that would open up, a form, a way for them to get connected right online, would start moving them through the process, even though because in the past we would always just wait for them to come into the building before we could start the process. And so now we don't wait on them to come in the building.
Yeah, we got a great example of one of those where it was one of our churches. A person was watching for 4 weeks online, walked into their place and says, I'm ready to give my life to Jesus and be baptized. I want this to happen now. And their eyes just got big because they didn't know what to do, right? They didn't know how to handle this new type of engagement. So interesting, because you can't say to them, well, why don't you come next Sunday, or wait till the service is over and then I'll introduce you to a person who can help you, whatever it is. That's just not going to work anymore.
Well, but that is part of that shift, that mindset shift, which is your first engagement with somebody is not when they walk in the building. It is not anymore. And so, and everybody knows that, like they all know that by, just because it's commonly said in the church space and in every space. But to your point, what happens is we still assume that the beginning of our process, most churches do assume the beginning of their process is when the person walks in the door. And to your point, now people actually are much farther along in the process. And so you need to be smart as a church to get into that pregame and get them connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes. So FHC, I believe your model or your vision is to build bridges for a dynamic life in Christ. So, what were you looking to be different?
Right. So yeah, we say we want to build bridges that connect everyone to dynamic life in Christ. And one of the ways we do that is we recognize, even the image of a bridge is a pretty local thing and a pretty iconic thing to cities. Like, you don't think of, the Golden Gate Bridge and think of a different city other than San Francisco. And so in some ways we looked at our location in Charlotte, and specifically the campuses that we have, which are in unique locations throughout the city. And we said, those spots need to be a place where folks look to get connected. And so where in a lot of times, in the larger mega church world, there is a franchise mindset, which is like, hey, we just want to, push them into these spaces and we'll connect with who connects there. We say, in a little bit of a different way, we want to make sure that we're deeply invested and embedded in the community. So by that token, our campuses are going to be a little bit unique from each other, and we're going to have to deal with some nuances in the way that the people in that community want to connect. And so we wanted a more concierge type connection. We didn't want just a program that we dumped in to every one of our locations. And so in that sense, every one of our campuses has a kind of a meta version of the connection process, say, for example, but it's nuanced based on the rhythms and the cycles that they have experienced with their congregants, which is kind of that second part of individual uniqueness. Like, people today actually expect a lot out of any entity that they interact with, because they're shopping on an Amazon that's already suggesting the things that they want to buy because they've paid attention to that person's behavior. And so the expectation that a church would actually be aware of your needs as you come in the door is actually growing. And so the people will reach for what they want, and then get what's applicable, as opposed to the one size fits all. It's like, no, rarely anymore do you get any type of communication from any business that's like a shotgun approach. It's like the Sears catalog idea of connections is not a viable option anymore, because people aren't going to sit there and thumb through the 64 pages of programs that you may offer just to decide the one they want. They're going to come in, they're going to have found something on your social media channel. They're going to, oh, that's interesting. They're going to click on something, and they're going to want to suck right into that. And then they want you to talk to them about that thing, what they're actually connected to.
I love this thing you have here, like hope is not a strategy, right? It's just fun for me to hear that, because it's I've heard from so many people, right, that when everyone returns, we're going to do this, and there's no timeline given to that. It's just when, and so there's just this hope that this is going to happen. Anyway, so this is what I mentioned earlier. This investment in online experience, I said, was done by most churches, right? But it dwarfs the engagement experience, what you're talking about here. And that's the purpose of ministry, right? Your front end, your front door, your side door, that's really, really important today. You're almost you're an IT company now. Churches are half IT company. But the most important thing is the relational aspect of spiritual formation. And that tends to get a little lost in this, digital frenzy.
Yeah, I think that's at least the concern that a lot of pastors have, is that they start working on the digital space, and somehow that's going to keep people from actually experiencing what we would say the dynamic life in Christ. Right. And I think that's because we don't really have a term for this, which you talk about engagement experience. Engaging, first is really, churches in some ways are just communication organizations, right? They're communication. And most of the times they've been projection oriented. So they try to reach broad with a projection of message. And then as people respond to that and come in, they wait till they come in the doors to actually get connected to somebody from an engagement standpoint. So the way that churches in some ways would look at engagement experiences is that's what the building is for. And you're thinking that you're leaving a moat around your building that people are falling in, and you're losing them, because in some ways the engagement experience is that bridge that drops down that allows people to traffic to and fro from the city. Otherwise, you're over here, you're projecting out here, people don't know how to cross over and get into this space, and you're leaving them. And even if they want to come in the doors, you're leaving them in that gap.
Yeah. And a really sad stat of a church I spoke to recently, they mined their database and found that over 100 people who had registered for baptism had never been contacted. And that's just brings tears to pastors when they hear that. Listen, we got lots of bullets on here. Normally in these things you have one or two and you talk about those. There's so much to unpack here, but in the interest of time, I think we're going to move on, but we are going to have a time for Q&A after this.
Yep.
So what do you think the value of, what value have you gained from this?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it. We've seen a lot of people. I mean, you talk about centralized data. Like, we have seen a space where all of our campuses, we can see who's connected. We can see where they are in the process. So that means whether you're a pastor or a church leader, you can take a glance in there, or as an individual, who is in your span of care, and you can kind of keep up with them, but you can see it from multiple levels, multiple points, all funneling to this same place. Yeah. This idea of tracks, I mean, for sure, we have deployed quite a few so far, and have a lot more that we just keep imagining of how we can connect with folks to make sure that they take the steps that they're interested in taking with the church and alongside of us. Like this idea of being able to see at a glance on your mobile device or on your computer what actual relational touch points you need. You know, so it's not just ministry tasks, it's relational connections, right? Which are ministry tasks, but it's what it is. It's this idea of, okay, I got 3 people I need to phone call this week because they're interested in adopting a child. I need to have a deep level conversation, or I need to spend some time praying with or for these people. You know, and then being able to take it and report out to just look and say, oh, okay, here's how we're doing. And your process over here is getting this kind of a result. People are staying and getting connected and sticky. We can actually share in ways because we're learning new things from one another, and, you know, having some good reporting there.
Yeah, it's kind of just struck me here, you know, like this is the database administrator's dream. You know, this is how do you connect and build relationships for your congregation. And remember, everyone thinks, oh, this is for new guests. No, this is for every one of your congregants. How do you drive them for what breaks their heart and grow them, right? So,
right.
Yeah, and you know, the idea of this being a new guest, yes, it does that, but that's like one small part of what we do. If we get an engaged community, you will have far more evangelism, and you would have far more people coming in through that channel than you would just coming in online. And this is what we're hoping to do. And then the daily ministry, this is pastoral care dream, because on their mobile device, they can now see everything. And then this is an executive pastor or a senior pastor, you know, to be able to see what's working, what's not, which campus is rocking, which one's behind, how, and let's talk about this, what's being done. So thank you for putting this together. That really is a clear view. So we pulled together a couple of screenshots here, right? So maybe unpack a little bit of these just real quick for the audience, because we'll probably have about 5 minutes left, Jim.
Yep. So, I mean, real quick, this is a look at just kind of some of our new guests for all of our campuses. And so you can just see at a glance, all the campuses that we have operational and where people are. Obviously, these are pretty recent steps. And so we've got a couple of kind of key connect points, you know, like looking at this, who's responsible for contacting these people? What is, you know, where are they at in the process, which is, and, you know, it either has been completed, it hasn't, or it's in process. So we can kind of see that. And then we can start tracking how fast people actually do get connected. We have some ways to drop them into, okay, well, how do we follow up if they're disengaging from the process versus if they're deeply engaging? We can skip a step if they're ready to go extra fast and extra far. So those are, yeah. And then we can, you know, take a glance and see how many people are at the, you know, are in the track, how many people got added in the last few days. So yeah, really helpful stuff.
And what are these, Andrew?
Yeah, so up top, and that's just like, you know, if you're looking at how many text messages you're sending or how many phone calls you've made. I mean, one of the things that we love is you can track, you can send an email and then you can create notes. So like if somebody replies back, you add in notes of, hey, what does this person have to do? Like I got an email the other day from somebody who wanted to get involved in our digital, you know, online space, who's got some skills in that. And she had just joined, you know, gotten connected to the church only 2 or 3 weeks ago. I mean, and it was an email, a text message. You can keep track of your text messages back and forth inside the application, which just from a super low hanging fruit as an IT guy too, you know, churches, you have your device and it's like, well, is this my personal number? I'm texting everybody back and forth. I'm giving them all my personal number, or am I giving them the church number? But if I need to have text message conversations, and so growth has been fantastic in that, because we're actually able to put a text message, you know, a specific message with your device, so that person can keep span of care inside of the application, and they still have their own personal phone line, but they're able to engage through conversations on the application. And so you can see, right, like just within a month, you got 135 text messages sent. And we all know this is people respond via text more and more. They talk, they expect to be contacted that way. And if they give you your phone number, like if they give you their phone number, they're going to usually respond back with that. And you have a responsibility to care for that well, but this has been a huge help.
Yeah, and yeah, forgive my dogs in the background if you hear them. I knew it wouldn't take long for them to start barking because we got about 900 of the things. I think what you said earlier, which I think was, to me, struck me, was that, when you started this might be just one track over a small period of time, like in a week or so. However, what used to happen is there used to just be one way. So that was email and text. But now, as the process is better refined, you'll see you're almost getting as much back as you're sending. That relationship is happening. And now we're storing all of those notes. What texts have they received? What notes have I written? And you have like the profile of growth for this customer right on the pastor's mobile device, which is like awesome, right? And then, there are other analytics that we can provide, but, you can see at a glance all your different tracks that you're running and what needs to happen. Yep. So these are some of the processes you've automated today, right?
Yep, that's right. I mean, things like people are interested in adoption, new guests. We, through COVID, we did this whole re-engagement drive and uploaded a big CSV file in to say, hey, where are you at? How are you feeling? What's your, what questions do you have for us?
Right.
First time givers. I mean, what you recognize is that especially with younger generations. I mean, we've had a funny couple of funny conversations where if you get to be a big church, you bring in a lot of new people. Yeah. And they kind of assume it works like college or something, where it's like, oh, it just happens because look, there's big buildings and things that happens.
Right.
And so you have to have this conversation that helps unpack why a church exists, what does it do, why is it valuable to actually give in that sense. So all that stuff, you build these conversations along with somebody.
Yeah, and another one that, again, that's actually been pretty well researched, right? If people engage in scripture and respond basically in their hearts or in writing, there's behavioral change.
That's right.
When people are taught about generosity, there's behavioral change to giving. So again, these are all engagement aspects, right? If you talk about discipleship or mentoring in this, if you don't have a program, how do you expect to have leadership multiplication? It's like, so, but these are the things we tend to just, I don't want to say be lax on, but we tend to just want the congregant to come forward. Whereas really the whole thing is flipped now. The whole script is flipped. Now we're going to engage the people where they're at, how they're at, give them easy access to tell them what's on their heart, and then immediately route them to the right campus, to the right pastoral care, to yes, drip messaging, which can be intercepted with personal messages from the personal span of care. Really, really big deal. Andrew, anything you want to close with, and then we'll open up for some questions.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just from me, thanks again for having me here. Thank you guys for the product that you are developing, the relationship that I think maybe this would be the pieces that growth also is a relationship company that cares about the churches that it serves. And I think that's something that you can't minimize as a church that wants to do ministry, that wants to connect with people at a deep level. The fact that growth is saying, hey, we're going to come alongside you and we want your church to succeed and we want your people to get connected to the gospel, to actually knowing Jesus, to growing in their faith.
Right.
That's fantastic. So thank you for that. And I think, working together on this has been just, really an exciting project.
Yeah, it's actually one of our, what do you call them? Our fundamental tenets is that, we want to grow people in the love of Jesus Christ, and really that's about it. So it's a people-oriented tool, and it's one of those imperatives for our company is to drive towards that goal. So thank you, Andrew, but we're not done with you. So we're going to open it up to some questions, and we'll do a Q&A. So thank you. This ends the formal part of it, and we'll do Q&A now. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Andrew, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I get the live version, everyone on. I appreciate it. As you can tell, we did record that earlier. But thanks for joining us. So I was emailed some actually, because some people who are on know me, and I got some questions here for you. And actually, most of them have to do with the the adoption. Not physical adoption, the adoption of the tool. So it says, what challenges did you have in getting staff to adopt this? And they said, especially with the, what's that? Oh, with the mobile device.
Yeah, so a couple things maybe. Adoption, change management inside any organization is tricky. Change management inside the church, I would say, in my experience, is probably as tricky as anywhere else, if not more tricky, because there's just a lot of history of how people do stuff, and there's not kind of this rapid looking towards the new ways that things are changing. So what we've had to do as we've built out kind of the technology adoption process is we've spent a good amount of time on the front end of this, taking key areas, key individuals, and helping them to see success. So multiple campuses, we didn't roll everything out at every campus all at the same time. I think that for us, we said, okay, well, let's pick one area first. Let's work through what a track would look like. Let's work through that. Let's bring a few people who have a vested interest in making sure this works, and make sure that we test it. And then once you see that, you build more people in the organization who are advocates for it. The other thing we did concurrently is I leaned in pretty heavy with the leadership, the executive leadership team at our church, which consists of 3 folks who kind of run a la a single senior pastor role. So you've got a, executive director of operations, pastor of ministry, pastor of kind of direction. And so getting them on the same page was a key piece of that puzzle. So whether that's your senior pastor or an executive leadership body or something, helping them to understand the value proposition along, and also saying, we're not going to just change every system we have all at once. You bring in 5, say, tracks, and you go, okay, well, we care about the new guest experience. So we're going to try it at one location, or maybe you try it with one ministry area, depending on how your church is structured. And from there, you can build, and it starts to scale pretty quickly because you get advocates. And so that's the approach we took. And so now we are at a place where we are starting to really roll it out across all of our, we'd say, adult kind of discipleship ministries. And we're then taking kind of the cross-sectional vertical application across all of our campuses. And just taking one more layer at a time. I think you're muted now, Graham, or I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. That was on me on mute, in case the dogs go off again. I've always got that concern in this household. You answered 2 of the other questions in there, which were, how's this been embraced at a campus level? And did you get executive pastoral approval? So let me just stick on that one again, because that's interesting, right? Because you obviously need, when the rubber meets the road, you don't want to just be told by friend X to do this. It needs to be a strategic imperative of the church, right? Which is, we need to do better with our resources, especially since most churches, I would think, have reduced number of resources here. How did you so-called sell them on that one?
Yeah, I think, we'd gone through a little bit of a vision casting process pre-COVID, which, created this conversation around how do we make sure that we engage people online. So we had a value that we had spent some time thinking about. Engaging online is a critical pathway for us going forward. And so that was helpful, and it was cross-sectional. I mean, that process had people from all layers of the church. And so as we came out of that, then the question is, well, how are we going to do that? And I would say, and I'd be happy to go into even more depth, but broadly speaking, I created a bit of a action plan that said, here are some key objectives that we want to tackle. We want every ministry to get to have both a kind of a physical digital connect point, because every ministry, generally speaking, was physical first or in person only. And I wanted to make sure that they were thinking with the same mindset that said, I need to actually engage with people in the digital space as much as I do physically, which opened the conversation to, okay, well, what tools do we have? Natural place to go to ask is me and my team and my department. And so that question was on the docket. And because the leadership team really was saying this is a priority of the church going forward, really we were able to kind of get over that hump. And I think the other piece, just to it took a little while for us to talk regularly with our executive leadership team to make sure that they knew that digital ministry is actually a pathway into, like, when they get into the theological, it's like the corporeal ministry. It's like, it's important that embodied spirituality happens. And so that type of theological discussion happened across the board. We got one of our campus pastors who did like he was working on, he's working on some schooling, and he's writing a paper on embodied spirituality. And so, we got all that type of conversation going. And so finding a few of those advocates who go, I see where the digital experience is going to yield more fruit, even in our personal, at our campus, in-person spaces. And so you got to kind of work through that question as well.
Excellent, thank you. I know we were originally going to be for 45. We're at that, but I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll close it out. Do you have some examples of where this has helped specifically at Forest Hill?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. You saw in the webinar we did some of our new guest stuff. We've seen the rate of people who get connected, like that has increased a significant number. I'd probably have to go and dig in, but I mean, it just from our kind of general conversation, it's percentage, like 10%, 20% better connection rates. And then I would say in light of that, it's also getting people directly to the conversations, the needs that they have. So whether it was people coming out of COVID, we asked a lot of people, hey, what's going on? What's your concern level coming back? Well, that immediately, broad stroke, we were able to reach a lot of people. And then there was a lot of specific conversations with folks who said, we're really nervous. Can you pray with us? Can you pray for us? Or we are excited to come back, but we just aren't sure about A, B, or C. Or, wow, even just as simple as, I'm just grateful that you noticed. I felt lonely, and I was grateful that I'm on your radar. Like, it mattered to me that you guys knew that you hadn't seen me in a while, and that I'm on your radar, and that you actually care about where I am and what's going on in my life, not just when I'm in the building and when I'm in the chair that I normally sit in, or when the check comes through, or when I sign up to volunteer for the nursery, but like, you haven't seen me in a while and you just cared enough to check in. And so I think kind of multi-layers there, those are a few specific examples where we've seen that really happen.
Well, that's fantastic. I'll give you one of mine. I had to call some people during COVID to make sure that they were, see how they were doing, how I could pray for them. And of course, my phone number came from some other city in the country where it originated 15 years ago. So when they see that, they think robocall, right? So no one answered. And so now it's coming from a number which is local, which has the church name on it. And so this is the church reaching out. So just
That's right.
Little things like that help tremendously. Andrew, you're awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This has been great. And, just as I get to know you more, just your, it's the tactical side, which I think you bring. You listen to the philosophical side and the sort of, as you said, the embodied spirituality side, which is a little above my pay grade. But it's like, how do you get people out of the pews into the arena, working with people, and it's just all of that, which is so, so important. And yes, the Holy Spirit works in people's lives and moves people towards that, but we should be a part of that process as well. So thank you for adopting. Thank you for leading. This is something that is, we hope that you will be a leader in the nation in doing this. And I fully intend to use your IP as we push that around the country. So thank you. And to everyone, this will end the session. Thank you very
Perfect.
much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.